everyone, welcome to the Art Workshop. I'm Christopher Epling. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We really appreciate it here on Pike TV. Your viewership matters a lot to us, and we hope to provide for you some really quality and fun programming, and this show is one of many here on the channel. With our show in particular, we deal with looking at different types of mediums and how we use those in art to get different effects and just have fun, and we also look at different approaches to art and different styles, and then also subject matter, and then also techniques. So we're looking at perspective today, and perspective is one part of art. Perspective is challenging for a lot of artists, myself included, and sometimes whatever you see and think of perspective, it's kind of hard to get a visualization of what that really is. But if you think about what's closest to you being larger than what's farther away from you, that's one example of perspective, but there's many, many more. Now we're trying to combine today an interesting subject matter in terms of perspective and angles. So angles is a big part of perspective. Perspective is made up of all different types of elements, but one of those is angles. If you know anything about angles, angles have different degrees that line up in lines to create shapes, of course, and where and how those shapes are positioned will actually give, in art anyway, when you're using something that's non-photorealistic or not on film, the challenge of actually producing something that resembles something in reality. So that's the challenge that we have, and we think we've come up with a really cool exercise for you today to do that. Now, if you create something at home and you'd like to share that with us, we'd love to have it, and I want to give the email address right now for that. You can jump onto piketv99@gmail.com, so just send that to us. So you just upload your links, pictures of your art, and send those straight to us there at piketv99@gmail.com. We'd love to share your art here on the show. Be sure and leave your name with us and age and whatever information you'd like for us to know, maybe where you are in the viewing area, and we'd love to share it. All right, so today we're going to be working with oil pastels. It's one of my favorite mediums because they're really neat in how they blend. And we're going to also be using, and I like to also always talk about the materials that I use, so here's a really good opportunity for us to go ahead and do that right now. Oil pastels are considered a dry medium. Of course, many times whenever you use them, they feel wet, but they're kind of a combination if you think of it as so. So we're just using some basic paper, and then the oil pastels come in sticks like this, which you take and then color almost like a big crayon, and you can blend using different means. You can use your finger, you can use all sorts of different ways to blend them. And then of course we're going to be using a pencil today. I'm going to be using a basic blue lead pencil and a graphite pencil. So they're both graphite, this being blue and this traditional gray. So I'll be using these pencils. Always need an eraser. Mine comes in the form of an eraser stick pencil. You can use a block eraser, the one at the end of your pencil. And then also, I'm using an angle. It's kind of hard to see a little bit on the screen, but there you can kind of see a little bit better. A ruler will work as well, but you'll see how I use this in just a little bit. So we're going to start off, turn your paper long ways. So it's actually, long ways is not the official way to say this. I think the correct title is portrait. If it was more long than it was tall, it'd be landscape. So turn it in a portrait orientation, so it's taller than it is wide. And we're going to start by going right here at the top corner. So this is my top corner of my paper. Start at your top corner, and I want you to position, if you have a ruler at home, that'd be really handy. Position your ruler just so that it's coming inwards towards the top portion of your paper, and you can see kind of a little bit of the angle I'm going for here, and then you're just going to draw a line. So there's my first line. If it's hard to see, I may have to use the darker graphite so you can see it a little bit better. But we're just pulling a line in towards the center of our paper, starting at the top, so that might help a little bit more. There we go. So this line is our first line. We're going to be keeping this line. The second line we're going to be making, now we're just getting general shapes right now. We're not really focusing too much on detail. This line is actually going to come in. Now start at the tip of where you ended, okay, and you're going to be pulling towards you, pulling inwards towards the other corner of the paper now. And if you do not have a long enough ruler, you may have to do this in segments, which is perfectly fine if you need to. Of course, using angle to draw with, you have to. So there's our first shape. So if you can kind of see how that works, it goes inwards towards the middle and then down. All right, so it's our first shape, and we're going to leave that alone now, okay? Now the second line we're going to be making is going to come in from up here, this edge of the paper, over here on this corner, and we want it to come pretty close to where our first line stopped, but not exactly. And we're actually going to be ending a little bit higher up. So we're going to ending almost where this other line stopped, but not exactly. So you're just going to draw a line coming in now towards the center and stopping right about there. And again, let me get the darker one so you can see it. Pulling down and stopping right about there. So now we have three lines made, right? Notice how this line came in towards this edge of the paper. On this side, we're doing the exact opposite. And once I make these lines, you're going to be able to see a little bit of what we're dealing with when it comes in perspective today. So this line, of course, is going to be coming down towards the opposite edge of our paper, coming out towards the tip right here. And you have to sometimes line it up till you can see about where you're shooting for, and then before you ever execute. Now again, if your ruler isn't very long, you have to maybe draw 2 lines, perfectly fine. As long as you get it as straight as you can. There we go. So now, I have 4 lines drawn on this paper. It doesn't look like very much right now. Before I reveal what this is exactly, or what it's supposed to be, let's drop down to about right here, about, I'd say, a quarter ways up the paper. And I want you to start on one side, and you're going to be drawing a line that is going to be angled slightly. So there's a little bit of a small angle to that. And start on one end and draw a line going across, connecting these. Now I know this doesn't look like a whole lot right now, but it will. What I want you to do first before we ever worry about these shapes up here is come back down to the bottom. And what you're going to do inside of these shapes, you're going to be creating more lines. That's right. So starting off first on this side, what I'd like for you to do is go ahead and you're going to be drawing a series of lines. So you draw one more line, but watch, I'm going to stop about halfway across with this one. So you see this one did not come all the way across the paper. From there, I'm drawing a line going down, okay? So you can see how I position my angle. Draw this one down, crossing the other line to here. And now you're going to pick back up where you left off, and you're going to continue the line on outward from there. Now what we did with this first line that we drew going all the way across, this is kind of our guideline. So you can actually get rid of this one altogether now. All this really served to do is to tell us where our lines need to be, okay? And we're going to get rid of this other one as well. It helps to kind of give us an area to work from instead of just drawing blind, okay? So we have a lot of weird shapes, okay? But when we start to put in more lines and more detail, you're going to see how all these combine together to form something that gives us the an idea of perspective. So here where this angle meets, right at the edge, draw a line coming down like that. Over here where this line meets with the other line, you're going to do the same thing. Straight line coming down like that. And now this is sort of starts to look like a building, right? This could be a building next to another building here. To make sure we get the full effect of this though, I'm going to add a little more detail. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to actually drop down below, just below this line here, and I'm going to draw a parallel line coming across my page here, like that. All right, we're going to have a little bit of an angle here. This is a rooftop, so I've made an additional line now that cuts into these other two. So it comes down now back across. So we're sticking with everything, but we're just adding two now. Over here, let's put a window, almost like a loft or a window that you would imagine maybe in a city landscape. And of course at the top we're going to draw another line here, and let's put a arc here above it, just like that. And now we have what we can imagine to be a window. Let's get rid of the line in the middle where we don't need it, right here. And let's go ahead and sketch in a window. Now, we're going to get to the point where we do actually work with the oil pastels in just a second, but I want you to go ahead and complete the look of this window here. And the detail that we're going to be putting in is not so much on the line work, but the color as well, because how you show perspective is also, or depth, is with color. So now running across the top of this building here, we're going to have a line that's going to come out to the edge and stop. This is going to be the top of the roof. This comes out like this, right over to the edge. It actually overlaps it just a little bit, just like that, and it's going to come back in. So go ahead and draw that in. Once you have that done, you're going to make an additional line similar to that one, a little bit smaller though, and this one's going to be running across the top of this line. So this is actually going to be coming in this direction, parallel. We're not adding too much. Once we have that, we can draw a gutter coming down our building, and we're going to start at the top up here. Now, as you draw your line down towards the edge again, you're going to actually be going further away from this edge. So it's just a slight angle to this. It's not very much, but just that little bit of an angle helps to show that there's perspective happening. At the top here, our gutter will of course come across the roof. We'll just draw a shape like this at the top where it's going to be collecting the rain. Circular gutter, and then down this side, it's going to, again, as it comes down closer to this edge, it's going to get wider, just like this, all the way down to the main edge. All right, now we have a gutter drawn. We have this back piece here. There are a couple more buildings. The one thing I want to add is a window. This can be a little tricky, so just remember to line your ruler up so that you're making parallel lines with slight, very slight changes in how the perspective is in terms of the degree of the angle. So it's just a little bit of a change in the angle. So there again, a parallel line coming down this way. Okay, now this will follow the line of the roof, this edge here, this line of the roof, and that it comes out this direction, just like that. If you need to make smaller lines at first to kind of see where you are, that's perfectly fine. Now this line will come down, and again, similar to your gutter, closer as it comes down, and then the bottom line, of course, will be a little more evened out here. Now to make this look a little bit better, we're going to actually jump back up to the top, right up here, and we're going to draw a line coming in this way, so make this look a little more 3D, as you will. And then a parallel line with this top line here, and then down this side here. So now we have the look of a window in this building. After we get to this point now, we can actually start in with our oil pastels. Now we know that there is all of this area behind us here, so we can assume this is the sky. Now you're going to see as I start to apply this that there are different pigments that you're going to see popping out, and this is only comes from use over and over of this particular oil pastel in coloring other types of art. Now when you have a fresh set of oil pastels, you will not see the coloration, and you can actually get rid of this too by, if you were to sketch or use the oil pastel on a separate sheet of paper to test it out a little bit, maybe clean it up some by coloring with it a little bit to get these shapes, the color out of the pigment. You can do that. And I'm starting out with this turquoise color, and as you can see, when you first start to apply the oil pastel, it almost looks like a crayon. There's areas of white you can see that's popping through. That's fine. And I'm going to just go ahead and color the entire top portion of this in this really nice cyan turquoise type greenish blue, and have it filled in nice like that. Now as I come down further towards the buildings here, I want to, as I get closer to this edge over here, or this corner, apply less and less pressure so that less pigment is being collected on the page. And there's a reason for that, because here shortly this is going to be where our light source comes in from, so we don't want as much in that corner as we do in other parts. So here's where I start to apply a little less pressure, filling up this space with color, just not as much color as above. Okay, it's a slight variation, not a whole lot. Now once we have that, I like using my finger. That's my favorite thing to blend with. So I'm going to go in now with my finger, and I'm just going to go all the way across all of this area that I just got through coloring in with my finger, and I'm going to blend it. And you can see some of those other colors popping out a little more now. Now the reason this is important is oil pastels work best when you have layers and layers of pigment on top of one another. So this looks very light at first, but as we continue to work with these oil pastels on this particular drawing, the blending process will actually show a lot more hue, and the tone of the pigment will start to come out more and more. Just blending all the way across the top now, making sure everything's at least been touched once, blended once over on each little portion. And you're going to see that sometimes some areas, actually have more pigment on it than others, of course, like in this corner here, and that's okay if it doesn't blend as deep as the other portions. We just want to make sure and spread the pigment across the page. All right, there we go. We have one go with this. Now, these buildings here will be darker because of our light source. Our light source is going to be coming in from this corner. Think of a sunset or a sunrise. So I want to go back up to the top then, avoiding this area right now because that will be, as we said, less pigment in that area. And I'm going to pick a sky blue color, and now I'm going to go and press down a little harder. And this is where you can start to see the pigment blending a little better. You may notice that on your screen, even at home, you can see the color starting to pop out a little bit more. And just go over all of the area that you just colored, covering it evenly, making sure to get all that space filled up. And once you've done that, we're going to repeat the process again with blending these colors. As you get closer to the edge down here at the bottom, we're going to use less pigment by our pressure, and we control that by the amount of pressure we pushing down on our carbon stick here. I'm sorry, our oil pastel. A little bit closer to this edge now, pressing down lighter so that it starts to just very lightly coat the paper. Something like that. Now, finger again, going over it one more time. Now they do sell smudge sticks and things like this you can actually purchase so that when you go in and actually start to do this, you don't get a mess on your fingers like I'm making. And it also avoids, even when you put your fingers down in other parts of the page and the paper, getting that portion of the paper then covered in pigment. But we are going to push forward. I like a little bit of a messy approach to oil pastels. I can't help it. I just really like the look of it. You can be as neat as you want and as technical as you want. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep applying hues of blue onto the sky here. And each time that I do that, I'm going to stop and I'm going to blend. And that's going to be my process. So in order for us to save time, you're going to see me duplicate this over and over until we get to the buildings. And then we'll color the buildings some, blend some, and repeat that until you can see the whole process evolve there at home. So I'm going to get started on that now. Okay, so we've completed our portion of the sky now. You can see how this is. I used a little bit of yellow. I said we'd only work in hues of blue, but tones of blue. So now we're going to work on the buildings. Now, light to dark has always been my philosophy, but as you can see, I'm putting a little bit of dark already over here. This is more of a version of a green color. Now, your buildings will be darker. Think of this as being down in an alley looking up at the sky, right? So it will be darker down in portions of this. According to this side here, where the light is going to be reflecting, will not be as dark as the other building. So we have to keep that in mind. So I'm only going to be going around just putting some of this color in here in some spaces. Now, of course, for the purpose of the show, we do have to speed color through some of this. But before we do that, I want to give you some basic helpful techniques that I can't talk to you and tell you about while I'm speed drawing. One of those is, when you get around shadow areas, when you think of like this being a 3D object on top of a 2D being paper, right? So we have to think about this in terms of there's a shadow going down along the line, the back of this gutter. There's going to be a shadow underneath either the roof up here, and there'll be a shadow inside of the window here. So think about where light will hit. Okay, be thinking about that the whole time that you're working. Where will light be hitting and affecting the surface that you're working on? So I'm going to be using a combination of colors now. You just remember, please, at home, that you could use whatever combination of colors you want for your walls of your buildings, but be sure and go light to dark and watch as we go along where I'm going to be using shadow. I'll show you when we're finished and when we go in before we work on these back buildings. I'll look at these and tell you, kind of go over what I did there as an explanation. But if you want to follow along with me now as we lay a surface of color on this building, then we'll stop and talk about the light over here before we work on this one, okay? All right, let's move forward a little bit more, adding more color to our surface. So we've now finished the building here, which is a little darker colors. I like the grungier look to this anyway. What we want to do is focus on this portion now, this building, and like I said, start light, go to dark. So I'm using this very light peach color here, and I'm going to coat it as I've been doing, but I'm going to leave a little bit more of the white from the paper to come through. And as you can see, I've already placed some shadowing here inside the window. And you can use a color on top of areas. Let's say you're not really going to leave this peach color. It's fine. As long as you have a base coat that you can start applying more layers of a pigment onto that, you're fine. Because really, the blending is a huge part of this. And after we finish coloring in this portion of our drawing, we'll work now then on the back with these buildings. These will be much darker, and when that happens, when you see this all come together, you'll see then how light then is used then also to help the viewer to see perspective with art, because all these things come into matter and they make a difference in if you can pull off perspective or not with art. So light to dark again, using similar colors, blending all the while. And then once we stop speed drawing through here, we will then focus on the back buildings in the foreground. All right, let's get started now coloring on this side of the drawing. Okay, so as you can see, this wall is much darker than this one here. We've left some of the same color of the sky on the window to show that it's reflecting. You can reuse color, so if I've used brown in some areas, you could go back and use more brown, of course, to do shadowing. It's really good to do that, I think, if you're going for a consistent look. If you're doing something more abstract, of course you can use any color you wanted, but reusing colors really help to make a piece seem more completely unified. There's more of a, seems like things are connected. Now, we're going to be focusing on these back buildings back here. These are much darker. The light source coming in this way. Of course, all of this area will be much darker, except for there's some areas you have to pay close attention to. So up here, from the edge of the roof coming up to this point, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to paint here with this salmon color. I'm going to go ahead and put this in here, this peach type color, showing you where the light will come down. So this will actually come down this way. And then, of course, across the tips of the buildings, the very edges, we want to kind of leave a little bit of light. So this is just a little bit of white to show more of where the light's coming from. Now, you can, if you want, add some details into the actual building itself. Like, for instance, you can put some square shapes, just very abstract squares. We don't want to show too much detail back here, just to kind of get an idea that, this is a building, and there's more here than what we can see. This mostly will be covered up once you start to put all the color in back here in the back, but it's interesting to have that. And you'll have a little bit of Of course, on the window panes here as well, you may have some color seeping through too. All right, so just remember, light to dark, but you do have to start out with a little bit of a heavier color back here because this whole area will be dark. So I'm going to use this greenish, bluish color here. It's it's more of a green, to go ahead and get this area right here, which is going to be that building. So you can see now how that shading pops in. It makes it look a little more 3D. And then from there, this entire building in the front, of course, will be dark too. However, we will go back once we have started to work with this color more, and we will make this section stand out by making it a little darker. So now I'm going to go ahead and pull in the color and start to move it around more. And you'll see me now build this up layer to layer, just as I've done these two buildings in the foreground. And we're going to have all of this connect and make sense, especially with perspective, through using color, shape, and of course, all those elements combined, right? So let's go ahead now. We're going to work inside of these parameters we have. I may make this building a different color than the other one, but first I want to have a color for a coat to lay down. And so I'm going to use the same color I started out with on this other building to do that with. So let's speed color through this. Watch how I build up my areas. And when we get finished, we'll talk about it as a whole and what we learned. We've done what I think we've done well and what we could do better. All right? All right, follow along with me, building up very slowly. All right, everyone, so as you can see, this is a work in progress for sure, but if you can kind of get an idea of where we started with just a few lines, and now where we've ended up, we have, I think, clearly identified perspective in this piece. Now, there's a lot of things that I would have done differently now, and you learn that as whenever you create a piece, you will see, looking, in hindsight, what you would have done differently. However, though, this has turned into more of an abstract piece, which I'm perfectly fine with. You at home, if you do not have all the colors that I use for my piece, you can insert different colors here and there to kind of fill in. Overall, though, as you can see, we started out, of course, with just some basic lines. Those lines then turned into angles. The angles then transferred over to, we had surfaces. We had a left and right building, left more dark than the right, and then the really, really dark buildings in the background with their light source coming over top of them this way. Now, as you can see, if we had more time to really develop this, really spend time in here working on one portion, one segment at a time, we could really develop it well. However, though, you can see the start to it. So this is not a finished piece by any measure, but you can tell where we would go if we had more time. We thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this lesson on pastels and perspective. If you followed along with us and would like to share it, we'd love to see it. You can send your work again to piketv99@gmail.com. Just make sure whenever you send it to us in your subject line, maybe include artwork for show or something along those lines, or the art workshop. Leave your name, age, any information you'd like to tell us about yourself, perhaps in terms of where you're from, and we would love to share that here on the Art Workshop. So till that time, thank you so much for tuning in again for Pike TV and the Art Workshop. I'm Christopher Epling. Till next time, keep drawing.